You're now listening to the 1130 podcast. Enjoy the show.
I'm from the city, DC, that's where I'm from. 1130 podcast, Dre on wheels, he is the one. Let's get it, yeah. Who with me? Let's get it, yeah. Who with me? I'm from the city, DC, that's where I'm from. Let's get it. 1130 podcast, Dre on wheels.
Yo, what it do, everyone, man? Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the 1130 podcast. What's good? Y'all already know what it is, man. It's your man Dre, aka Dre on Wheels. Back at it with another episode. Appreciate everyone tuning in here on YouTube, you guys, man. If you're new to the show, if you're new to the podcast, and you haven't done so already, I don't know what you're waiting for, man. Definitely do me a huge favor. Definitely hit that subscribe button down below, you guys, man. Like it, leave a comment, and share it. Do all that great stuff, and don't forget to follow the 1130 podcast on all social media platforms. Now that's out the way, you guys. Another episode of the podcast show, man. Let's get into it, man. I got a great guest that's going to be joining me here. Mary Harper, you guys. She's a wonderful, wonderful author. We're going to be chatting with her on her latest book, you guys, man. At the sound of her voice, My Blind Parent Story, an amazing story. We're going to be chatting with her and everything she got going on. So we ain't going to waste no more time. We're actually going to get into it. Mary, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. How's everything? How's life treating you?
Yeah, good. I'm having a good time doing podcasts.
Okay, all right. I see you doing a lot of podcasts right now. Your latest book. So is these podcasts new to you, or just been doing it just been doing it for a while?
Oh, I've just been going on different people's podcasts for the past few months, and it's been a lot of fun meeting people.
Okay, that's awesome. Where you from?
Originally from Muncie, Indiana. That's where the story mostly takes place. But right now I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And
Okay.
Love it out here. I have views of Pikes Peak and I can see the mountains. It's just gorgeous.
All right, that's awesome. Gorgeous. Hey, look here, you gotta have something gorgeous. You say you love seeing the mountains, though. That gotta be awesome, though. Once again, Mary, I appreciate you for coming through here on the 1130 podcast show. Thank you for taking the invite. For my listeners and viewers who's watching this on this episode, I like to have the guests take the floor. You mind telling everyone about yourself?
Sure. So I was born in Muncie, Indiana, and both of my parents never saw me. They never saw what I looked like. They didn't know what I looked like or what my brother or my other two sisters looked like because they were both completely blind. And yet they made a living for themselves and a life for themselves and didn't let their blindness stop them. They were born back in 1913-14, only about 60 miles apart in Indiana, central Indiana. And both of them were born with glaucoma, which is very unusual for a baby to be born with this horrible eye disease. And their parents knew it right away that there was a problem because their eyes were very enlarged. They were just big, and babies' eyes aren't supposed to be quite that big. And the reason for them being big is because of the glaucoma was pressing on the optic nerve, and the eye was just getting bigger and bigger. So it was interesting because my mother was born on a farm near a very small town, and the country doctor came, and when he delivered the baby, he knew there was a problem. So he said, let me consult with the doctor in the big city of Indianapolis. At that time, it wasn't nearly that big. And later he came back and told them, don't waste your money on doctors. Don't take her all over the place because there is no cure. Nothing will help her. She will be blind. But you can love her and give her the best childhood possible and encourage her, but she's not going to be able to see. So that's one story. The other story shifts to Muncie, Indiana, which is still a fairly small town of about, right now, 55,000 people. Anyway, my dad was born to Italian immigrant parents. They immigrated from Italy around the turn of the century. So and they had an interesting life in and of themselves, but they were very Catholic. And when they found that their son had glaucoma, my grandmother in particular would not accept that. She was not going to accept the fact that her son was going to be blind. So she took him all over the place. She took him to doctors in Indianapolis and even Cincinnati. And different people would say, "Oh yeah, sure. All you have to do is give him this these eye drops, and that'll help." And no, my dad hated those because they hurt every time she put those eye drops in, and they did nothing. And another doctor in Indianapolis said, "Oh yes, I can do surgery on him, and he'll be fine." I'm like, "Oh," so she believed him and took him there and did surgery, and that he was angry about that because it was took the very last of what he had, which wasn't much. His last memory when he was really young was seeing they lived near railroad tracks, and there were rail cars parked along there. He said, "I can remember seeing those black coal cars and the white snow on top of them, but that's all I can remember seeing." So, how sad. That's all he knew. He didn't know
Mhm.
colors. He knew intellectually that a fire truck was red, but he didn't really know what red looked like. So, and then his mother still wouldn't give up. Sorry, need water. Mm. She took him to Italy after the First World War ended, and it was safe for them to go across on the ocean. They get there, and she takes him to a doctor in Florence, and he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can do." And she just can't believe that Italian doctors, they should be better than American doctors. But she, so she wouldn't give up and still kept praying for a miracle. And they stopped at every little roadside shrine to the Virgin Mary that they could find and prayed for his sight. Then she took him up in the mountains and told him, "There's a faith healer up here." So he went to see the faith healer, and he was just sort of basically rolling his eyes at that, thinking, "I know that's not going to work, but I'll go just to please my mother."
Mhm.
So he goes in there, and of course, she does some mumbo jumbo, and nothing happens. So he's quite resigned, and he's okay with losing his sight. He doesn't really know the difference. He's got an older brother named Charlie. Charlie took him everywhere. They got into so much trouble and so much adventures. They had a great life as a childhood growing up. They really had a good time together. Um, my uncle taught dad how to drive a car, taught him how to swim in an illegal gravel pit. Nobody was supposed to be there, but they went on different trips together around, and they just had a wonderful. Uh, he took him wherever he was playing. So my dad really, really looked up to his brother, older brother. So, but that's the contrast between the two families. One very Catholic and very devoted, and one was more Protestant and more practical. And um, I forgot to mention that my grandfather, my dad's father, owned what they call them back then, a confectionery store. And that's where they sold homemade ice cream, homemade candies. So my dad figured out how to go by himself from the house to the store. So when he wanted to go visit his dad, and I'm sure he got a piece of candy when he got there. So he knew how to go from their house down there. He knew every curve, every pothole, every alley, and he got himself there, no problem, all by himself. So he's
Mhm.
adventuresome from the very beginning.
Awesome, awesome. That is really an incredible an inspiring story too. As you know, as you was just telling, I think the one thing I want to ask you too, how was it for you growing up, which both of your parents being blind and never seeing what you look like, and did you how was that growing up for you? Although they were loving caring parents and there for you, but they never got to actually sort of see you. Was that a thing that maybe bothered you, or growing up to that extent?
Well, I didn't know any different. I just sort of thought everybody's family was like ours until I got into elementary school and realized, oh, or I started watching television, and the sitcom families were very different than ours. But so they had different ways of looking at or telling who we were, especially my mother. She would touch my hair and she said, "Oh, your hair's getting long." She always liked to keep it short because it was easier for her to shampoo when I was real little. So she said, "I think it's time for us to go get your hair cut." I'm like, "Okay, mom." But she would feel my face. And then when I got into high school, that was back in the 60s, mini skirts was a big deal. Everybody had to, all the girls had to wear mini skirts, and it didn't matter if it was 10 degrees outside. We were wearing really short skirts. And so I'd come down to breakfast and mom's sitting there and she says, let me see what you have on. So I'd have to walk over to her and stand there while she feels my shirt and she says, oh, you've got your blue sweater on. I'm like, yeah, I do. She knew all of our clothes. And then she reached down and would say, Mary, this skirt is so short. How can you? This is just not right. You shouldn't be wearing things this short. I said, Mom, all the girls are wearing them this short, and that's what you wear. But your legs will get cold. I said, oh, I don't care if my legs get cold. Later I did. It was cold. I look back at that and think, all right, what you'll do for fashion. So she would touch us and she would know. Now, my dad did more hugging and it was more, hi, how are you doing? And he would say things like, oh, you're getting so tall. And uh, the other thing we had to do, you know how little kids will come up to you as a parent and say, look at my dolly, look at what I got, or see what I have.
Hmm.
And most parents will look at it and just say, oh, yeah, da, 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 da. Well, my parents wanted me to put it in their hands. So I don't know if you can see my hand. Anyway, I would put my hand, this would be their hand, and I just put my dolly in their hand, and my mom would then start to feel the hair of the doll and the shape of the doll and the dress. And she would say things like, what a pretty doll and what a pretty little dress she has on. That's very nice. Then she'd hand it back to me. But that's how they would see things is by touching them. So,
Okay, okay. I think that's awesome. Really, really awesome. Did you deal with any type of, peer pressure? I mean, well, not necessarily peer pressure, but things from, other classmates or school. Because, like you said, when you went to school, you saw every other parent, every other kids, their parents were, different than yours. Obviously they could, see back. But did you just was like, well, you know what? Although my parents are, blind and they may can't see, but they're the best in the world. But yeah, did you deal with that?
not so much. I remember more, it was my feeling of frustration when I realized, oh, those people have cars. They can get in their car and go anywhere they want, whenever they want to. And we would have to stand outside waiting for the bus in all kinds of weather. And I hated that, especially when I got into, junior high and high school. It's just not cool to wait on the bus outside in a small town. So other people got to go on vacations, and we didn't. We stayed home almost all the time. Every once in a while, we'd take a trip somewhere, but that was a really big deal to be able to do that. Um, I will say this that my father traveled a bunch for business. He went to Notre Dame Law School. He was the first blind graduate of the law school, and in 1939, I think it was. And he passed the bar on the first try and went into the practicing law with his older brother, Charlie. Anything that my uncle wanted to do, so did my dad. So when my uncle went to Notre Dame, Dad said, well, I'm going to go there. I can be a lawyer. But my dad had a it wasn't so secret to his family, I guess. They realized that he was in love with my mom. They met at the School for the Blind in Indianapolis. And that was back then a boarding school. Very interesting because they had in the 20s, the boys on one side, the girls on the other. They couldn't talk to each other. They couldn't eat together. They had separate dining rooms. They had separate playgrounds. They had separate activities. They were just not supposed to talk to each other. So it was hard for my dad to actually meet anybody. That here comes the title of the book is called The Sound of Her Voice. And that's what he remembered was the sound of her voice when she had to stand up in fourth grade and recite a poem. So he memorized that as she was reciting it. He remembered every single word and the sound of her voice. And he would replay it in his mind over and over, especially during the hard times when they were separated when he was in school. So it's a sweet love story.
It is that is a really really love story. Just knowing that you lost your sight and you got to use all your other senses, hands, and everything else to make up for that, and even just hearing and even memorize that in the sound of her voice. I thought that's definitely a love story you can definitely see in a movie, or I
Yeah.
can. But as a parent now, me as a parent, my little man is 2 years old, and I have a disability. I'm in a wheelchair, and his mom is also in a wheelchair too. And from hearing about your story and reading up on it, I think it's very inspirational because me and my fiance talk quite often about how our son, potentially growing up in the future, just um uh can't find the right word right now, but potentially growing up in the future, really being not only being an inspiration, but also not necessarily uh I can't oh man, I can't find the right word. We always talk about it because we both have disabilities and both of his parents have disabilities. So he is more so looking out, not necessarily up his parents' keeper, but he definitely, if we drop something, he's the first one to pick it up, or
Yeah.
I can definitely see him growing older and not accepting or tolerating certain stuff where it's like, well, um other kids, they may be running up and down the steps, and it may be tiring or difficult or challenging for those kids, or they just feel
Mhm.
like, I don't want to go up the steps. But my son would probably not complain because look here, I got two parents who are in a wheelchair, not able to go up and down some steps, and here you are with legs and walking. So you guys should be grateful. And I think with you having the same, both parents who are, blind and, weren't able to, see. And I think, you carry out that, sort of responsibility of just um, uh,
You're
I'm
definitely
trying to put,
more, you feel much more responsible. You, I think, also grow up faster,
yeah.
because I learned at a very early age to walk with my parents. And well, they taught me you always stop at the curb when you're walking and then crossing the street and look both ways, of course, but they could also hear if there was a car coming. But definitely, we had that responsibility. I had to look up and make sure there wasn't anything overhanging, like branches that they would get hit in the face with, or cracks in the sidewalk that they might trip over. Sorry about that.
Hmm.
Mm. So we were much more aware than, I mean, most kids just skip down the sidewalk. Their parents might be walking behind them, but we had the responsibility of walking with our parents.
Hmm. I definitely dig it. I definitely dig it. And I think when certain situations like that, and God, for put certain people in positions, I think they're special ones. I think they're really awesome. Especially looking after your parents, and who are blind, and even what I was saying about my little son. But like I said, you're author of this amazing book, an amazing story. Did you always want to sort of be an author, or sort of this story was this so inspiration that you had to tell it?
Well, that's funny because if people tell me how inspirational it is, and it never occurred to me that I would be writing something inspirational, because if I had sat down to say, I'm going to write an inspirational book, I'm like, I'd still be sitting at that screen and it would be blank, because I'm like, how do you write something inspirational? But just, I wanted to tell their stories. My first thought was, these stories are way too good to let them just fade into the past, that I wanted to keep them alive for my children, for my grandchildren. And so I thought, okay, it took me a long time, over 10 years, to write this book, because it's such a huge story. I could have written one book just about my dad. He was amazing, going to law school. He was an attorney. He was a judge. He was a community leader. He was president of this and that board. And he helped so many people in his lifetime. He was amazing. His brain was unbelievable. How he could memorize all those law books. Because you think about it, back in those days, there were no recorders, no computers. So he had to wait for a reader to come and read to him. Now, the state of Indiana paid for that reader to come. But okay, so he has to take notes, and he has a Braille typewriter he's typing his notes on. And then the reader is reading this technical stuff, and he has to not only listen, write down some important notes, but he has to remember it all, because as soon as that reader leaves the room, reader's not coming back when an hour later dad says, now, what did he say about that case? I don't remember. He can't look it back up. He can't go back to the textbook to read it. So he has to remember it all.
Yeah.
Underlying all that is a huge pressure and stress because when my dad and mom fell in love late in high school, he wanted to marry my mom, but my mom said, "Nope, you have to prove to me you can support me. If you can support me, then I'll marry you." Well, think about it. Back then, and even now, what does a blind man do for a living? He was a good musician. He couldn't play well enough to suit himself. But he said, "Well, I could play in a bar, but how do you make a living playing in a bar?" They taught him
Hmm.
at school how to make brooms, and he sold brooms in high school. You're not going to support yourself or a family selling brooms. Caning chairs, with the wicker stuff. No, he's not going to do that. So uh, when his older brother decided to be a lawyer, dad says, "Oh, I can do that." So that's what he did. He went off to law school, and then he had to practice law for a year to prove to his mom that he could earn a living. I mean, to my mom. Um, and you think about it, who's going to hire a blind lawyer? Is that going to be a problem? You're going to get any business? And it turned out that when he became a lawyer and started law, the news came and they did a story on him. He's in all the local newspapers, and phone started to ring. So yeah, he was able to convince my mom to get married, and they did. And then there's more hurdles too when they wanted to have children, and all the families said, "Oh no, blind people can't take care of themselves, much less children. And how would you do that? And you shouldn't have children." But um, they had my sister in 1941, and no 43, and then in between there's two more kids plus me. Then at the end, I'm the baby.
Oh, okay. All right. Like I said, I find it to be very inspirational because even just living life and living daily in life, there's always a lot of obstacles, a lot of or society better yet telling you what you can or what you cannot do, especially if you have a disability, like how you
Oh,
just say how your mom, your parents, better yet, were blind and no, they can't have a kid. Who says who?
yeah.
And obviously you came out wonderful and very inspiring. So it's like, I mean, I think we sometimes tend to lean in more on what society says or more of how society feels about
Mhm.
us instead of just going and doing normally what we are passionate about and doing. So like I said, I think it's really amazing how your father heard the sound of your mom's voice and remembered it. I thought it was amazing
Oh yeah.
in school. So you know me and my fiance jokes about how I made her laugh, and that was sort of it for us when we met in school and stuff. So it's sort of an awesome love story to say. So
Hmm.
uh, I think that's awesome, awesome though. But your book though, right now that's available wherever you get your books at the sound of her voice. My blind parent story. Was it difficult trying to write this story, or you want to just more so celebrate your parents as well and share their story because there's a lot of people out here with disabilities, but are afraid to share that story, and just have it just go into the dark.
Right. It didn't bother me at all because we were already a fairly prominent family in Muncie because my dad had big sing eye dog all the time and everybody knew who he was. And they wrote about him in the newspaper. I went to newspapers.com and I typed in his name. There were over 1,000 different references to him. They kept putting in so many things. Well, when he was a judge, every person he put in jail, it was in the newspaper, or everybody he fined was in the newspaper. So there was a lot of stuff. Or whenever he gave a speech to Boy Scout Troop Number 10, uh, Mario Peroni, who talked about caring for a seeing eye dog. So, you know, that was news back in the 40s and 50s. That was just interesting, also culturally, to see how things were written up in the paper. So, and how disabled kids. Before my dad, he was on a board for establishing the first school for handicapped kids. Oh my God, those kids back in the before the when was this? The late 40s, I think it was. Those kids didn't go to school. If you were in a wheelchair back then, you didn't go to school. My dad was rejected from school. He tried to go to a parochial school because I remember I told you he was a Catholic, and
Yeah.
they went to the Catholic church and that had a parochial school there. And the nun says, "Nope, we can't teach him. We don't know how to teach a blind kid." And so they sent him. But she did say, "I can save his soul." So she let him come to religion class once a week if he had a student to walk him home.
I think that's always interesting. I always, say because, I was fortunate to, be in the 90s generation and growing up there. And I remember saying to myself, oh, wow, like I wanted, because, I always have conversations with other people and obviously my fiance. It's just about how far wheelchairs had came. And I always thought, hmm, how was people maybe getting around back in those days? If they were in a wheelchair, and how you just explained, if you were in a wheelchair, you didn't go to school,
You didn't
and I
go
thought that was
anywhere hardly. You just didn't go. You were sort of stuck at home, and there was a big article in the paper about how the school is open now. I don't remember how many kids they had, maybe 10, 15 kids, and the kids were thrilled to be able to get to school. And there was even one little boy that was blind, and my dad would go on his lunch hours and teach him Braille. So it was just really cool to see. It's neat that people are out of the home and into the public. But even now, it's you don't see that many disabled people out and about.
Mhm.
You see a little bit
Yeah,
more when with
yeah.
with the ADA, and you see people out and about some, but you just don't see many disabled people.
Mm. Yeah, you really don't. A lot of them are sort of, closed off in home in a way because a lot of things can frustrate you. I
Right.
know I'm a person who's been in a wheelchair for a while, so I know like if you go places and it may not be wheelchair accessible, or the elevator may be out, or anything sort of to that nature, though.
You got it.
Um, but yeah, I couldn't imagine that time where it's like, hey, you know what, I can't go to school because you know what, they don't want to sort of
They don't want
accept.
you.
Yeah, they don't want me. So
Right.
I find that to be, very, very interesting. And you said how your parents went through a similar situation. So wow. What inspires you? What keeps you motivated?
Um, I just want to get the word out, I guess. I worked hard on the book, and people who read it love it. And I get emails from people, and I just think it's fun to hear from people who maybe knew my parents or saw them, or and even if they didn't know them, it's just people read it and they'll say, "Oh, I was so inspired." But also, I try to make it funny in places, and it's sad in places. I will admit to that, especially near the end. The cycle of life. But overall, I'm real happy with it. So
Hmm, That's awesome. Really, really awesome. Look at it, Mary. I appreciate you for coming on the show and sharing your amazing story. Everyone is listening and watching. The links will be down below. At the sound of her voice, my blind parent story, which is available now that you can get your copy on, and definitely grab a copy for real. And all the links will be down below for Mary's social media pages as well. We're going to move on, and before we end the show here with Mary, we're going to go to the 11:30 podcast hot seat, you guys. Yes, time for the. All right, Mary. It's time for the hot seat here on the 11:30 podcast. I got 5 questions for you, and we're gonna roll with it. You ready?
okay.
Okay, all right. 5 questions for you. If you can go back, well, do you have any regrets? If so, if you can go back and change them or do anything over, what would it be?
Ooh, you mean in regards to my parents, or just my own life, or
Or
what?
just anything, just life, or anything. It could be to your parents or.
Uh, it's funny. I don't think I have too many regrets. Only would be some when my children were young, and realizing that I had a very difficult little girl. It was easier for me to yell at her than it was for me to figure out other ways to deal with it. So that would be one regret I would have. I wish I hadn't yelled as much. But it turned out really good. And she's got 2 children of her own, and she's a fabulous mother. So I don't think I hurt her too much.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Okay, if you could tell your younger self something that you didn't know then today, what would it be?
My younger self that I didn't know then, um, patience. I was not very patient, even though I was trying to learn patience through my parents, but it wasn't until they were older and I was doing more caregiving and taking them to the doctor, and my dad was moving slower and slower. And I guess it would have been nice to know patience, but I think that's something you learn. Kids, I don't think, are naturally terribly patient. So I guess I have to forgive myself for that one. But
Yeah, I think patience is one that we all sort of learn and adapt to, especially in a situation like that. So yeah. Okay. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go?
ooh, Australia. Love
Hmm.
to go to Australia. There's 7 continents. I've been to 6 of them, and I just need to get to Australia, and then I will have done them all.
Okay. Oh
Yeah.
wow, that's awesome. Okay, that's really really cool. All right. All right. We're gonna move on to question number 4. If you could talk to anyone in the world, past, living, or present, or you can make a book or a title or anything, what would it be? Your new book?
A title in my book, or who would I talk to? Which part of the question?
Well, yeah, more so that's what I was trying to say. If you could create a book, uh, and your new book, what would it be? Like any genre or just
Yeah, it'd be more
it would be
biography. I'd talk
more.
more to my parents, and I'd ask more questions.
Okay, ask
And
more
I get a lot
questions.
more and say, "Okay, mom, was I right?" Some of that stuff I realized only when I was doing the research. For example, my mom's relationship with my dad's mother, her mother-in-law, was not the most friendly relationship. I would go
Mhm.
into more in depth on some of that, and more about how they felt during times of their lives when it had to have been so hard to raise kids. My mom was always worried that CPS would come and take us away because she was blind, and so was my dad. And just because of that, uh, we had to look good. We had to behave well out in public. We always were clean when we were out and about. So she wanted to make sure that, oh, Miss Peroni, she doesn't know her kids are dirty or have dirty faces or something because she can't see. No, she made sure that we were clean before we went out.
I gotcha. Okay, last question. What are you most proud of?
Well, I guess the stereotypical answer is my children. I'm very proud of my children. Making it this far. How's that? I'm
Okay.
70 years old and I made it and I'm still going, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Okay, look at that's not a bad answer at all. Definitely not a bad answer. Some people, don't have the opportunity or privilege to make it that far. So, and share a wonderful story. So, once again, Mary, I appreciate you for coming through here on the 11:30 podcast show. Great having you on. Like I said, everyone who's watching and listening, at the sound of her voice, my blind parents' story is available now. Definitely grab a copy before you go. Any questions? Any shout outs? Anything you'd like to say?
No, just that it's available on Amazon.com. And if you have questions, you could always email me at my name, Mary, at marypharper.com.
Okay, gotcha. I love having you on. It was great chatting with you, and I love the story. Very inspirational. Like I said, you guys grab a copy and support Mary. For everyone who's watching, please stay tuned. Sit tight. We're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna come back with the rest of the episode, man, and wrap it up. And that WTF moment and more. Don't move. You're listening and you're watching to the
Cable for less than cable. More unexpected plot twists. Less unexpected fees. More committing to new shows.
Ooh.
Less committing to an annual contract. More being held in suspense. Less being held on hold. More modern. More simple. More than cable for less than cable. Try YouTube TV for free.
Yo, what up? This your boy Kenneth Stones, 88 Coffee Weaston.
This your boy D.O.D. Good Brother Bowl.
And we are the Dirty Hills. You already know, man, you tuning in to 11:30 podcast. Not 7:30, but 11:30.
Dude, that's my job. Not 7:30, but 11:30.
Yeah. And you have been Dirty Hills approved.
Yo, we back here on the 11:30 podcast show, man. Appreciate everyone sticking with me throughout the break. Mary, thank you for coming through on the 11:30 podcast show. Really awesome time having you on. Great time vibing with you. The links are down below, you guys, so you can definitely grab a copy of her latest books. Very inspirational story. Growing up, having two parents that were blind, man. I know that has been a very, very, very challenging at some point, but I know it had to be inspirational because, just from the story that, Mary told here on the 11:30 podcast show this week, I recommend everyone definitely go follow her. All the links are down below, and definitely go grab a copy of her latest book and definitely check it out, man. And speaking of parents, man, I'm a parent right now. And of course, in 2 months, my little man will be 2. And he's like terrible 2 at this point right now, where he just can't stay still. Man, he's like super busy, and man, he like hot too. He like hot too. So I know I said before the break, you guys, I got a WTF moment of the week, but you guys, man, on this specific Wednesday, it's back-to-back Wednesday, so we got 2 episodes of the 11:30 podcast that's coming up next. And the next episode, you guys, that's coming up, I got a real dope WTF moment, so you guys want to stick around and definitely check that out, man. For real, like my little man is definitely grabbing on the door. I don't know what he want, man. At times he want to come in here, he don't want to come in here, but he do. But I guess when he hear my voice, he just like, oh wait, man, that's Daddy. But you guys, man, yeah, man. Far as wrestling goes, the 11:30 podcast Talk Pro Wrestling definitely returns this Saturday. We're gonna be talking more part 2 of some of the greatest moments that happened in the WWE Thunderdome era, man. And also we're gonna be chatting AEW, man. Some of their greatest moments, man, in that pandemic era. They have a Thunderdome, but they sure enough have Daly's Place. So AEW greatest moments in Daily Place, man, throughout the pandemic and more. Breaking down the King of the Ring tournament. Gunther is going to be taking on Uso next Monday in the Raw finals, and we're going to wait and see what happens this Friday on SmackDown with all the big matches. Randy Orton versus Carmelo. You got Tama Tongo taking on LA Knight. It's some really great matches to unfold, man, for real. So WTF, man, for all the parents out there that's trying to keep up with the kids, man, and WTF for for the ones that is just a lot, man. Just a lot. I got you guys, man. You got to stick around to the next episode. Stick around to the next episode that's coming up next, you guys, here on the 11:30 podcast YouTube channel, episode 196, man. I got a real good WTF moment for you guys, man. But you guys, man, I'm not gonna waste no more of your time. I'm about to wrap it on up and here on out of here. Beyond 11:30 return soon, so definitely follow the 11:30 podcast social media platforms. And I keep you all updated on Beyond 11:30, man, for real. But enough here, man. Mary Harper, thank you for coming through here on this week's episode of the podcast show. But for everyone, man, yo, until next time, actually, in just a few moments, man, another episode of the 11:30 podcast is dropping. So stay tuned, you guys, man. Yo, it's your man Dre, a.k.a. Dre on Wheels. Until the next episode, I'm out. Peace.
I'm from the city, DC, that's where I'm from. 11:30 podcast, Dre on Wheels, he is the one. Let's get it, yeah. Who with me? Let's get it, yeah. Who with me? I'm from the city, DC, that's where I'm from. Let's get it. 11:30 podcast, Dre on Wheels, he is the one.
He the one, nigga.
So Breeze, baby.
He the one.
With me,
So Breeze, baby.
Let's get it. You with me? Yeah, they gon' hate, but they copying? Was you sitting there on the carpet with us? Yeah, we